everybody, it's time once again for another episode of Cave Cat's movie and TV reviews. Again with your favorite host, the one and only Cave Cat. Dashing and daring, courageous and caring, faithful and friendly with stories to share. All through the forest they sing out in chorus, marching along as their song fills the air. You guessed it. Today, I'm going to be talking about Adventures of the Gummi Bears, which was one of the very first animated series to have ever been produced by Disney's television division back in 1985, along with the Wuzzles. However, there's a little bit of debate on whether Gummi Bears or Wuzzles came first. It's kind of hard to suss out. I briefly touched upon this show all the way back in my New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh review, but I'm going to talk about it here. Anyway, the idea for this show came about when Michael Eisner, who was the top executive for the Walt Disney Company at the time, was asked by his son to get him some Gummi Bears candy. The instant this happened, Michael Eisner immediately got the idea to pitch an animated series focusing on anthropomorphic versions of the Gummi Bears candy, depicting them as whimsical bear-like creatures that lived during the Middle Ages, i.e. a medieval setting. Once the show got greenlit, Disney produced Adventures of the Gummi Bears for the 1985 NBC Saturday morning schedule, and it ended up being a hit, as well as proving that Disney still had a chance at producing theatrical animated films after the box office failure of The Black Cauldron that same year. But now it's time to get on with the show itself. The show followed the adventures of the titular Gummi Bears, who are a group of anthropomorphic bears that live in the forest in an area known as Gummi Glen. The backstory is that 500 years in the past, Gummi Bears used to live side by side with humans, but were forced to leave when humans got greedy and envious of how technologically and magically superior the Gummies were in comparison. So because of that, the Gummies were forced to leave by sea and find another place where they wouldn't be oppressed by greedy and villainous humans that would use their technology for evil purposes. And once that happened, as time went by, humans began to regard the Gummi Bears as nothing more than just fairy tales and myths. But of course, this is where we're introduced to the 6, later 7, main gummies of the series, which are Gruffy Gummi, Zummy Gummi, Grammy Gummi, Tummy Gummi, Sunny Gummi, Cubby Gummi, and later on Gusto Gummi. The reason for this is because while many of the gummies were forced to leave to escape the wrath and greed of humans, quite a few groups of gummies had to stay behind in the hopes that the other gummies would return once humans would learn to renegotiate with the gummies. Anyway, as for the main gummies, there's Gruffy, who's basically the de facto leader of the group, who is practical and serves as a craftsman and mechanic. Though true to his name, he's rather grouchy, grumpy, and stubborn, as well as preferring the old ways of the ancient gummies, but still has a good heart despite all this, almost like Split Kid from the Garbage Pail Kids in a sense. Zummy is the oldest of the main gummies, being that he is rather wise, intelligent, and understanding, as well as a proficient wizard and bookkeeper. Yet sometimes he tends to be rather forgetful when casting spells, as well as mixing up some of his words and his speech patterns whenever he's under stress, much like Elliot Mess from the Garbage Pail Kids as well. An interesting thing is that he was voiced by the late Paul Winchell, who was the original voice of Tigger from Winnie the Pooh, before Jim Cummings took over the role, which he also does for Zummy. Next, Grammy is the second oldest of the gummies, being depicted as the motherly and matronly type who does the cooking and the cleaning for the other gummies, as well as having a snarky streak whenever Gruffy challenges her. She was voiced by the late June Foray, whom a lot of you will remember for voicing both Rocky the Flying Squirrel and Natasha Fatale and Rocky and Bullwinkle, Granny from the Looney Tunes cartoons, and would also later go on to voice Magica De Spell in the original DuckTales series. Now we have Tummy, who, as his name implies, has the biggest appetite out of all the other gummies, much like Garfield, which is funny since he's voiced by the late Lorenzo Music, who is also the original voice of Garfield. Next up is Sunny, who is one of the younger gummies, who has a great interest in human culture, as well as wanting to be a princess someday. Cubby is the youngest of the gummies, who dreams of becoming a great knight, though has a tendency to act rather rash and impetuous, which makes sense since he's the kid of the bunch. And finally, we have Gusto, who's a late addition to the main gummies, appearing in the final episode of the second season, where he's depicted as being outgoing and more open-minded than Gruffy is, as well as being a skilled artist and sculptor, albeit slightly unbalanced mentally. Oh yeah, and he's also accompanied by his pet toucan Artie Deco, who tends to be a chatterbox. And those are the main gummies of the series. Of course, there are other characters too, like a lot of recurring human characters, such as Kevin, the young boy who was the first human to befriend the Gummi Bears, Princess Calla, who's good friends with Cavan, will also later befriending the Gummies as well. King Gregor, Calla's father, who is the king of Dunwyn, the kingdom that Cavan resides at, Sir Tuxford, who is King Gregor's highest-ranking knight, and several others. However, the show is not without its share of villains. Like a lot of the later Disney animated shows that would be released later on, this show has some pretty neat recurring villains, like Duke Igthorn, a former knight of Dunwyn who is now the ruler of the dreary kingdom of Drekmore and is always striving to take over Dunwyn with the help of his army of ogres, who are rather hulking and intimidating but not very smart, as well as Toadwort, Toady for short, who is the smallest and the smartest of the ogres, albeit at the cost of being treated as nothing more than the butt of the joke to the other ogres. Igthorn's main goal of the series is to try and take over Dunwyn, believing that he would be a much better king than Gregor. Of course, his other goal is to also capture the Gummi Bears so that he can get his hands on their secrets, particularly the secret of how to make gummy berry juice. The reason for this is because the gummies tend to bushes of special berries called gummy berries, which are treated like regular berries when consumed, but they can be used to make a special concoction known as gummy berry juice, which allows gummy bears to bounce when consumed, but when consumed by humans, it grants them the power of super strength, albeit both powers can only last for a limited time. While Igthorn and his ogres were the most recurring villains of the series for quite a long time, the 5th season gives us another recurring villain in the form of the sorceress Lady Bane and her jackal-like servants known as Troggles. I have no idea why the producers decide to name her minions Troggles, as those are the names of the antagonistic creatures in the Number Munchers games for Macintosh, before becoming known as Math Munchers for Windows. Anyway, like Duke Igthorn, Lady Bane also strives to capture the gummies, albeit for a different reason than Igthorn. While Igthorn wants to capture the gummies so that he can get the secret of gummy berry juice out of them, Lady Bane wants to capture the gummies so that she can use their magic to strengthen her own magic, being that she also has her own gummy medallion. I forgot to mention that at the beginning of the series, Cavan, the main human character, found an ancient gummy medallion that was passed down to him by his grandfather, Sir Gawain. And after Cavan met the main gummies, he gave them the medallion, which was later worn by Zummi and used to unlock the Great Book of Gummi, so that the gummies would commit themselves to protecting Dunwyn and rediscovering their heritage. But anyway, as for the show, I want to be completely honest. As I've mentioned previously in my New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh review, I actually preferred Winnie the Pooh over Gummi Bears, even back when both shows aired alongside each other on ABC as the Gummi Bears Winnie the Pooh Hour, even though Gummi Bears actually aired on NBC. The reason for this is because after the show ended its 4th season, it moved to ABC for its 5th season in 1989 so that it could air alongside the New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh when the latter show started its 2nd season. Then in 1990, the show started airing in syndication for its 6th season, even airing as a part of the then newly established Disney Afternoon, which also included DuckTales, Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers, and Tailspin as part of the block. Though for some reason, back when I was younger, I didn't really think too highly of the show, and it somehow just didn't grab me. But back in 2009, that all changed when I decided to give the show a chance, and I watched every single episode of it on YouTube, and you know what? It's actually a lot better than I thought it was. I really found myself invested in the story and the characters, and even the plots of the episodes are really fun and exciting. Also, like the New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, this show also teaches various lessons to the audience, albeit they taught and conveyed the lessons in a rather subtle way, much like the Aladdin animated series would also later do. At least they don't beat you over the head with the lessons they taught like VeggieTales in the House would later do. From what I recall, the lessons that this show taught ranged from how even a kid can make a difference, treating others with kindness, having the sufficient knowledge needed to understand a situation, facing your fears, trusting your emotions, telling the truth, keeping promises, and many, many others. The lessons may not be quite as noticeable or as hands-on as what VeggieTales would later do, but even the astute viewer can immediately tell right away what the lesson of the episode is based on what the gummies do or even on an offhanded comment that either one of the gummies will make. But even in spite of this, I actually enjoyed the show after giving it a watch, and I think it's safe to say that I will give Adventures of the Gummi Bears 8.5 stars. I feel proud that I was able to give the show a chance over 15 years ago, and I'm glad that I did. It's like the old saying goes, you can't judge a book by its cover, And I feel that I ended up learning that lesson with other shows that I didn't think too highly of at first, but ended up liking after giving them a watch, like the 1970s Little Lulu anime or even the 1987 Garbage Pail Kids cartoon, as I've mentioned before. And if Gummy Bears would ever get a reboot, that would be interesting to see, even if they did make an appearance in the 2017 DuckTales series, but that barely counts. I mean, yeah, the 2017 DuckTales reboot did attempt to do a crossover with a lot of the previous Disney animated shows of the 80s and the 90s, like the Wuzzles, Tailspin, Darkwing Duck, and even the Floppy Dogs. But aside from all that, it's really nothing special and not as good as the original DuckTales. But with the Gummy Bears, let's hope that they'll actually get a reboot series sometime in the future. Well, anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this episode of Cave Cat's movie and TV reviews. As I keep mentioning before, don't forget to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more episodes of Cave Cat's movie and TV reviews or whatever video that I'll come up with next in the future. So until next time, later!